and welcome to Coping During the COVID Crisis. I'm Janet Gross. This has really been a year and a half of counting. Numbers of cases, casualties, capacity, and now numbers of COVID vaccinations. Who's met the goal, what state, what area, how many people around you are wearing masks, and are you okay or uncomfortable with that? One person's freedom is another person's anxiety. So as we continue our re-entry into society, how do we look around and not be a little judgmental about the pace that others are moving? Dr. Roy Salgado, professor of counseling at the University of Holy Cross, is here to talk about that, how to be gentle and not judgy as we transition out of this pandemic.
It's interesting, right? The different places in which we find ourselves throughout this whole experience. You know, when the pandemic first began, there were anxieties centered around one thing. As we've progressed, the anxieties kind of shift, and now here we are in a vaccination, post-vaccination, in the middle of getting vaccinations perhaps, type of anxieties. There are segments of the population that have been vaccinated, have been eager to do so, and have become vaccinated. Others who are not there yet, they haven't been vaccinated for a number of different reasons. And now we find ourselves in a situation where we have vaccinated people and unvaccinated people, and situations in which people are in mixed company and feeling apprehensive. Do I interact with a person who has been or has not been vaccinated? Perhaps some unvaccinated people thinking, oh, those are people that have been vaccinated, they feel secure, they're moving about, but am I at risk if they have perhaps the possibility of transmitting the contagion? And then you have people who are vaccinated who are apprehensive about those who have not been vaccinated. Well, why not? It's all of these different things. And I'm here to say, take a breath. People have their reasons for having been vaccinated, and people have their reasons for not having been vaccinated or waiting to be vaccinated. Regardless, it is important to realize that we can take measures to interact with one another in appropriate ways, and then you assess your situation and then proceed informed and accordingly so that you're safe and the community is safe.
And you know, sometimes it's almost a little intrusive to say, why not?
Right.
Or why did you?
Right.
Well, they have their reasons and they may not want to disclose.
There's all sorts of different reasons.
Yeah.
You know, everything from just vaccine hesitancy, we've heard that phrase, right? Mm-hmm. Vaccine hesitancy and whatever that may entail. And there perhaps are other reasons as to why people have not yet been vaccinated. And people aren't necessarily needing to disclose those personal reasons as part of your medical health care and priority to keep that private. In that, those who have been vaccinated, who perhaps are apprehensive about those who have not yet been vaccinated, or perhaps don't plan on getting vaccinated, to just know that you're protected. The vaccines, Moderna, Pfizer, and Johnson & Johnson, which are the ones that have been made available in this area, have a very high efficacy rate. Moderna and Pfizer have a 90 and 95% efficacy rate. Johnson & Johnson at about 70%, anywhere from 67 to 72% efficacy rate. So if you've had one of those vaccinations, you have been protected, according to what has been reported, against serious illness or symptoms, hospitalizations, ventilations, and death. So if you've been vaccinated, you may feel free and comfortable to move about people, whether they've been vaccinated or not. Mm-hmm. Those who have not been vaccinated, for whatever reasons, then you proceed accordingly to your own medical history, your own situation. They tell us, right, and we have learned that there is a 99% survivability rate. There's less than 1% of those who have been impacted by the coronavirus, if they've been contagious, if you will, if they have contracted the contagion, that there is perhaps a 1% chance of those who get severely ill to ventilations, hospitalizations, and death. So people are going to get sick if they haven't been vaccinated, perhaps. They may be asymptomatic. And so we just perhaps need to not be so fearful and know that there are therapeutics now. There are therapeutics. If there haven't been vaccinated, there are therapeutics that people can take to overcome whatever symptoms they may have. And so
we've learned a lot.
We've learned a lot in the past year.
Scary.
It's not where we were a year ago. And so we can take a breath, but just proceed accordingly, regardless of whether or not one has been vaccinated or not vaccinated.
Can you know, when I walk into a building or when I walk into a place, I look around and see, are people wearing masks? And then if no, then I can take my, having been vaccinated, I can take mine off.
Right.
But I guess I would definitely leave it on if everybody else is,
Right.
I would, it's not, we've lived with it for a year and how many months, so,
Right.
we can wear a mask to another place.
Right. I'll share a personal example. When I go to church, I don't go into the actual sanctuary. I might sit in the vestibule towards the back. There's like a partition where the way the church is designed. So where I sit, I'm far enough from people that I choose not to wear my mask in that particular spot. It's quite a distance. But then when I go to receive communion, I put the mask on to go because that's where people are closer to one another, and I come back. So using discretion, using judgment with what is comfortable and makes sense for you. And it's important to know what is comfortable and makes sense for you. What's a good choice for one person today may not necessarily be the same choice for another person. We all have our own medical histories. We all have our current medical situation, and then we proceed accordingly.
Right. It's so funny because we were talking about this and about how not getting a vaccine or whatever. When long time ago, that's what everybody wanted.
Right.
But obviously, it's maybe true in baseball, but it's not in if they build it. If you build it, they will come. No, not necessarily. It doesn't work in all situations, and I guess that's our right as people.
Right. And it's very interesting to see because we need, and I use that term not only for this particular contagion, but any contagion, a threshold of about 70% to get herd immunity. How does herd immunity occur? It occurs naturally. It can occur naturally through the antibodies that one develops as a result of having contracted a given contagion, whatever that may be, including COVID-19. And we, with the miracle of modern technology and science, can assist in that through vaccinations. We've learned that over the course of the past 100 years, that vaccines can kind of aid to move us toward that herd immunity. So I'm not necessarily sure what numbers are looking like now in terms of that 70% threshold, but we're closer than we were a year ago because we've had both people who have contracted the condition, who have developed antibodies, and however long that lasts in the system, perhaps, we're still learning as to how long that perhaps lasts in the system. That's part of that number, and then the percentage of people who have been vaccinated. And the numbers are different in different groups. The vaccination rates are different for Caucasians than for African Americans and for Hispanics and for Asians. The different cultural groups evidently have been vaccinated at differing rates for all sorts of different reasons. And so those numbers of the people who have been vaccinated, coupled with those who have the antibodies, have brought us to a certain threshold toward that 70%. And it's going to vary from state to state or region to region. And so there might be certain regions where that threshold for the herd immunity has been reached, others not quite so much. Nevertheless, we can still make informed decisions about our own choices and with whom we associate, if you will, and under what circumstances, and do so in a respectful manner and not be so judgy.
Respectful. Okay. All right, well, we're going to take a break. When we come back, more about how to have patience with each other as we all work toward getting over the pandemic. Stay with us.
Louisiana needs a hero.
Someone to look after it. Preserve it.
We have to do something now.
If everybody took care of their spot, we wouldn't have this conversation.
We all have to do our part.
The power is yours. All you have to do is pick it up.
Care about it. Protect it. Save it.
Be an everyday hero.
Keep Louisiana beautiful.
Welcome back. We're running into more and more people these days, people we know and don't know, people who are returning to a more social environment, but maybe in a different way or at a different pace than we are. So as we talk about handling this with grace and kindness, we've asked Dr. Amanda Salgado, Adjunct Professor of Counseling and Behavioral Science at the University of Holy Cross, to join us. Dr. Salgado, this is an issue even in non-pandemic times. We could be judgmental when people choose different paths. So how do we stop ourselves from doing that?
Absolutely. That's a great point. We as human beings, it's in our nature to be judgmental. And we often think that our worldview and our paths are the most appropriate ones, and we often get confused or agitated when others sort of veer into a different path. And so this pandemic has certainly exacerbated that tendency that we have. And personally, I'm seeing so much of just the conflict between vaccinated versus unvaccinated people, and both sides trying to find their comfort zone in being with each other, determining what's appropriate to do, what is not appropriate to do at this time. And it really does, as you said, it's going to take a lot of grace and kindness in order to navigate this, because this is such a new part of this whole pandemic experience. And some people feel like it was a little bit easier when things were just completely restricted and you really didn't have a choice. Now that the choices are becoming, much more similar to what we were used to, the dynamics are getting pretty tricky.
Right, and I guess, because we're all going through something new anyway, transitioning, trying to get back into wherever we're going to end up, there's a lot of, extra anxiety surrounding any judgment we might have. So maybe, can you talk it out? I mean, I know that the University of Holy Cross, Dr. Salgado, I know that the University of Holy Cross offers a program.
Right. We are offering counseling, free counseling services to those that are interested for free of charge for the whole state of Louisiana. Any resident of Louisiana can just simply call the number and get free counseling services throughout the duration of this pandemic. And that call will be triaged to the clinical director, who will then assign you to a counselor in training, and you can begin to talk this out. And if you are experiencing some sort of apprehension or whatever it may be related to interacting with people as restrictions ease, they can help you figure out what's the best option for yourself and how to appease or assuage, rather, any apprehension or anxiety that you may have.
Dr. Salgado, is this something that people can talk through? I mean, is it something that, like you said, you've heard some people who have a little problem with, understanding the other side of things. Is this something you can talk through with a counselor?
Absolutely. And I think one of the most important things that we can do as counselors right now is provide that safe space. I think many of us feel like, there's not a lot of safe space in the world right now. And sometimes we feel like there's not a safe space for us to speak freely about, our point of view. And so the counseling office is a place where you can feel free to really just let down your guard and be as candid as possible. And that just is such an amazing gift to be able to unload that onto someone who, is not going to be judging you or condemning you for whatever it is, whatever your viewpoint is.
And the counselors in training at the University of Holy Cross, they have been trained to talk about this and to really have the skills needed to help guide someone through this, right?
Absolutely. We have such a world-class program at the University of Holy Cross. Our counselors in training get the absolute best training so that they can be as effective as possible in helping their clients right now in one of the most unusual times that we've ever experienced. And so they certainly are well equipped to help people navigate this very unusual time.
We may never, a return to normal may not be the right way to put any of this, because that may never happen. There's going to be different things that happen because of the pandemic. So is that difficult for people to face, that we may never get back to where we were?
I think so. I think it's with any type of life change, whether it be, a divorce or a death, anytime you have a really traumatic experience, you hear people talk about a new normal. And so, the past normal it's going to look completely different from now on. And you get, used to a certain new normal and to a new flow of things. But I think that collectively we're going to, be mourning the loss of what was, of sort of we can think of it as kind of a simpler time pre-March 2020. And so I think that we need to give ourselves some time and space to sort of grieve that, because it is it is going to look different from here on out.
You know, and as a society, societies have always had to adapt to significant changes. You know, life looks one way before a particular event, it looks another way after an event. The world looked very different prior to the Industrial Revolution, and then after the Industrial Revolution, the world never looked the same. The world looked very different prior to the World Wars and the Great Depression. After the World Wars and the Great Depression, the world never looked the same. Similar, the world looked different during the Cold War and the fall of the Soviet Union. The world looks different. We're used to this. We know what things look like before and after significant events. The world is going to look different after this significant event, after this pandemic. And we're just living it during this time.
And I guess, Dr. Salgado, as we look at it in that light, change can so often be good, because you just, you know, as Dr. Salgado was just saying, you know, the Industrial Revolution and, you know, post-war things, we learn a lot when we go through things like this.
Yes, that is so true, and I think that that's always what I try to instill in, whether it's clients or my students or just anyone that I'm talking to, that there have been good things, that, you know, we do need to take time to grieve sort of a loss of the way things were, but we have learned so much throughout the past year. We have grown closer to one another, and hopefully we're going to see more grace and more kindness come out through this new time that we're sort of navigating. But Dr. Salgado's right. You know, we are adaptable, and we do evolve and change with the times as needed. And so hopefully we can take what we've learned and just be better and look towards the future with optimism.
Yeah, humans may not like change, but it can be really good for us.
It is, you know, and we're resilient. You know, we're resistant to change.
Yeah.
However, when we work through the change and come out on the other side, we tend to be more resilient. We've done it before, we'll do it again.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Salgado, I'm sorry I interrupted you. You were going to add to that?
Oh, I echo that. I think that there's just a lot of hope in the resiliency that we have, and just looking at, you know, how far we've come as a world through this past year. There's just a lot of good things that we can focus on as well.
So as we're resilient, I mean, and this is, you know, maybe a question that no one can answer. Do you think there's a time frame in just kind of putting this behind us? Assuming that we have some more answers medically, and, you know, all of the numbers and all of that. How resilient are we? Is it months? Is it years? What do you think?
I think it's going to depend on what we see as time goes by, the months ahead, what happens with the vaccines, if we continue to see their efficacy, and what happens with new strains. So I think it's a really, you know, fast-moving situation where there's something new popping up, and just so much information and sometimes disinformation that we have to wade through. So I think I think only time will tell, but hopefully as we do get just more insight into this virus and the vaccines and continuing to manage it, I think we'll start to feel more of a sense of normalcy.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Amanda Salgado, for joining us and for talking through this. We always appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much.
We'll be back in a moment. Stay with us.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Welcome back. We've been talking about how to respect each other's decisions as we move out of the COVID-clouded environment, and how to be confident in our own choices when it comes to safety and moving toward a post-pandemic world. It is a balance, not a forced march, and so we always, you know, we go at our own pace, I guess.
Yes.
We can't judge, we can't, you know,
we know our
mad.
own, right. We know our own history. We know our own situation. And so if we're sick, stay home. If we're healthy and we feel comfortable enough to move about, then do so accordingly, cautiously. And perhaps not necessarily asking people, have you been vaccinated, have you not been vaccinated? I was in a situation recently where there were a couple of people from different households in the same environment. And somebody made a comment about people who had not been vaccinated and used a pejorative term to refer to the people who had not been vaccinated. And he himself had been vaccinated. And so I just challenged him a little bit and I said, but you've been vaccinated, right? So do you feel that you're safe? Well, yeah, I'm safe. Then your concern about the unvaccinated people is what? Let them make their decisions for themselves, and they'll come to whatever conclusion they need to for themselves. And if they get sick, they know what the consequence is. It's a natural consequence. Unfortunately, if it's a significant one, if they are in those vulnerable populations, then it's a tough lesson to learn. But people make decisions for themselves all the time, and we can't control everyone. All we have control over is ourselves. And so live your life within the comforts that you have. And so there is that judgment that is happening. And then conversely, those on the other side who are unvaccinated, perhaps judging those who have been vaccinated, saying, oh, they're moving about, spreading things, they could be, contagious themselves and carry the condition and the virus, and they not get symptoms from it, but then pass it along to somebody who is vulnerable. Okay, well, if that's your concern, then get vaccinated. So on either side, there's an argument to be made on either side to respect the other side.
Do you think that as we go back to life in society, that it's really just going to to make that worse as we walk into a place and go, oh, well, not everybody's vaccinated, so everybody's got to wear a mask. Or why aren't you wearing a mask? Those kind of things that are now going to be clashes.
And that second question, too. When you observe who's wearing a mask, who's not wearing a mask, why aren't you wearing a mask, why are you wearing a mask? All of those different questions that are coming up. Not only are you vaccinated or unvaccinated, but masked and unmasked.
Right, and your choice makes my choice sometimes in those instances.
Right, and so we see that segregation, if you will, of people. Time will tell, as Dr. Salgado had mentioned earlier. Time will tell. Some of the sociologists and people who are looking at the way this is impacting the world is saying, we don't know when the end will be, but the end is not necessarily when the pandemic spread has slowed. There are these other aspects to it, and so it'll be a period of time, and perhaps history will tell us that this pandemic lasted in its after effects in the sociological ramifications, economic, educational, otherwise, for some years to come. Right. So it could be several years before the dust settles and we look back and say, okay, this is what happened.
Right, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense, because when you put it in perspective like that, we don't know the history we're making now.
We're living it.
Yeah.
We're living it. And so we'll have to look back a generation from now and see what this in fact was, how it played out, and how we came out of it.
Right, so it'll be a while. Maybe in our lifetime, maybe not.
We shall see.
That's right. Okay. So, as we talk about, these emotions that surround, going out, going to do this, going to a wedding, going to, a lot of people feel, and I truly believe this because I've read this, that it's almost like some people feel they've lost their excuse to be in their own sanctuary, to stay home. And so now they have to come up with some other reason, to say, I'm not going to go to the wedding that has 250 people.
Right, because it was convenient,
yes,
right? And it was appropriate to say, I'm not going to go to that. And now to say, I'm not going to go to that, you have to come up with some other reason, right?
Right, or make up some COVID thing or whatever, And
to that point, I heard that people who are introverted, that for them it was very comforting to be at home and to not have to really think about having to put on a performance or a show when you go out to do fill in the blank. Right. Whereas extroverts felt themselves withdrawn, depressed, anxious because their energy was drained from being home, whereas introverts, their energy is due to the rest and self-reflection and time alone So different personality types and temperaments responded differently to being quarantined. Now that things are opening up, some of the people that found respite in that are having to step back into a situation where they're having to perhaps make choices about whether to or not to engage in certain situations.
In many cases, it was easy to stay home. I mean, it was like a relief, kind of. Yeah. Well, we're not going to go to the big thing that always caused drama or whatever.
Personally, it felt great for me to not have children's birthday parties every other weekend. Because they seem to pop up a lot. And so that didn't happen for some time. So our weekends were at home in the backyard.
Right. So as we go into this, just, you know, as we're kind of wrapping up the show, there are helpful things that we can do, like take it your own pace. Is that pretty much, you know, don't look at somebody else. Do what? Yeah, you know, if you're experiencing apprehension or anxiety about being among other people, then calmly stay home. You know, it's good in many respects that society is opening up for other people, for industry, for education, for social interactions, for those that feel comfortable in being able to do so. If you're not there yet, that's fine. Nobody is forcing you to go out and do anything. If there are things that you want to do or have the need to do, the opportunity is there for that to take place. But if you're apprehensive, do it at your pace. Stand your ground. Stand your ground. Okay, well, any final tips before we go? Final tips. Respect one another. Relax, take a breath, take it slowly, be responsible for your own health care and well-being, and we'll get through this. Okay, and what's happening in the University of Holy Cross? The University of Holy Cross is bustling, and it is moving along both online and soon to be in the fall in person. So if you're interested in getting a degree in a bachelor's, master's, or doctoral level, reach out to University of Holy Cross and look at one of our 65 programs or more and see what might be of interest to you. We're there to serve and to help you improve upon your life. Well, 65, you got to find something in there, huh? There is. That you're going to like. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Voice Salgado, and your colleagues at the University of Holy Cross for joining us. And we thank you for watching. We want to help as we are all coping during the COVID crisis.